Hey guys, it's chapter 2, The Journey to Briar Lane of Looking for Home. Let's get started. Ethan watched the rain trickle down the streetcar window and shifted as much as he could without waking Will. In the seat across from him, Alice and Simon were sleeping. Ethan's eyes were heavy, but he dared not to close them. He had promised to keep watch over the children, and if he failed, they might be put off the trolley. The motorman hadn't been pleased when the conductor lifted the 3 little ones up the trolley steps. He eyed them suspiciously when Ethan held out the 3 nickels. "What's this?" he said. "Where's your folks?" "There's just us," Ethan replied. "I've got money for our fare." The man surveyed the group. Will clutched his sick horse. Simon stood wide-eyed and silent. Alice hugged her doll tightly, keeping one hand on Ethan's jacket. For a long minute, the motorman looked from one to the other of the children, stopping at Ethan, who held the flour sack and Will together under one arm. "You in charge?" he challenged Ethan. "Yes, sir." "Where are you going?" "To Briar Lane." The man scowled. That's the end of the line. We won't get there for a couple of hours." He scanned the silent group. "You be sure they don't run around the aisles, or I'll have to put you off. And don't you be blowing that whistle." He jabbed a thumb at Simon's treasure. "He won't, sir," Ethan reassured the man. "We'll all be quiet and sit still." "See that you do, and stay up here at the front, where I can keep an eye on you." The nickels were given up, and Ethan shepherded his sister and brothers to the first vacant seats that faced each other. "Ethan, can I sit by the window?" Alice whispered, sounding anxious. Ethan nodded. "You can take turns. When we stop, trade places with Simon. That way you can both see out." The plan worked well. Since no one dared risk the motorman's wrath, there was no bickering or crying. The swaying of the car, the rumble of the wheels, and the splashing of the rain soon lulled the little ones to sleep. In a very short time, Ethan's eyes closed too, and he slept as the trolley rattled through the villages and fields toward the county seat. A hand shook Ethan's shoulder, and a voice brought him upright in his seat. "Wake up, boy. This here's the end of the line." The motorman stood in the aisles looking down at the children. "Someone supposed to meet your younglings here?" It took a moment for Ethan's mind to clear. Then he shook his head. "No, sir. We don't know anybody in this town." The man stared at him. "Tarnation!" he exploded. "What did you come for, then?" He stared out the window at the driving rain and then down at his watch. "I got to get back on my run, but I can't put you out in the road in this drencher. You'll all drown in 5 minutes." He looked at the conductor standing in the doorway and gave a helpless shrug. "Now what do we do?" "Better take them into the waiting room, Dell. Maybe someone will be along to pick them up. I'll take the little gal if you can grab the boys, and we'll make a run for it." Before he had time to think it through, Ethan was following the conductor and the motorman through the downpour toward the small station. The flour sack slapped against his leg as he ran, and water splashed into his boots. In spite of their best efforts, 4 bedraggled and dripping children stood in the center of a room lined with benches. Ethan peered around cautiously as the men shook the raindrops from their slickers. There seemed to be only 2 other people present, a man behind a window and a woman sitting on a bench. The man at the window spoke. "Who you got there, Dell? Did you fish them out of the river?" He chuckled at his own question. Dell apparently failed to see the humor of it. He glared at the station master as he smacked his wet hat against the wall. "They'll be fishing you out of the river if you ain't careful," he muttered. "I picked these here kids up at Jefferson, and I don't know where they go." The station master sauntered around the counter and spoke to Ethan. "Where you going, boy?" "To the county asylum." "Is this it?" "Tarnation!" exclaimed the station master. "Orphans! Who sent them out alone this far, and on a day like this?" "'Tweren't their folks, I reckon," the conductor commented. Then he turned to Ethan. "Does anyone at the home know you're coming?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know. Is this the place?" Simon suddenly found his voice. "Are the cows out and back?" Before any of the men could answer, the woman spoke. "Those children are soaked to the hide. Isn't anyone going to dry them off before they shake to death?" Indeed, the 4 of them were shivering, and Will's teeth chattered. The station master led them over to the stove in the corner. Stand here and dry off a bit, he instructed. This isn't the home, but I suppose someone will have to see that you get there. The children huddled around the heat, and Ethan listened as the men debated their immediate future. I've got to get that trolley back on the road, Dell insisted. We can't do anything about them. Well, I can't leave here until closing time. The station master scratched his head. I could show them the way, but they can't walk in this. Botheration! Guess they'll have to stay here until I lock up. I can drop them off on my way home. Will tugged on Ethan's jacket. Hungry. We'll have to wait until we get to the home, Ethan told him. Rachel says they have lots of good food there. At the mention of Rachel, Alice burst into tears, and Will began to wail with her. Simon's lower lip trembled, and Ethan hurried to calm the storm. Hey, don't worry. We'll be there pretty soon, and you'll like it. Remember the animals in the garden. If you keep howling like that, we'll get put out in the rain. At least we're warm in here. Tarnation, Dell muttered as he dug into his pocket. Here, boy, you can have this nickel back. You didn't take up much space. He pulled a packet out of his slicker. I don't need no lunch. Too late to eat it now anyway. Feed the little kids there. Ethan gratefully accepted the offering, and the Coopers were soon munching on big sandwiches, pickles, and cookies. The woman departed with the trolley, and the station master was left to oversee his unusual customers. Ethan had no problem keeping an eye on his sister and brothers during the long, wet afternoon. They were too awed by the strange circumstances to move around the station, and when they spoke to each other, it was in whispers. As for Ethan, his vast imagination couldn't picture the home and life that lay ahead of them. He waited patiently for the station to close and the trip to Briar Lane to begin. The children watched with interest as the wagon covered the distance between the trolley station and the edge of town. Their guide, the station master, pointed out the landmarks with the wagon whip. There's the county seat. Ethan stared in wonder at the 3-story brick building. It didn't look like a seat to him, but this man must know. Here's your schoolhouse. You been to school yet? Yes, sir, but Alice hasn't. She can write her name and say her letters, though, he hastened to add. Ma taught her. On the outskirts of Briarlane, the wagon stopped in the road that ran past another large brick building. An arched sign over the entrance proclaimed Briarlane Christian Children's Home. Is this the asylum? Ethan asked. Yep. Ethan slid off the wagon seat and dropped to the ground. Clutching the flour sack, he surveyed his new home while the station master lifted his sister and his little brothers from the wagon. Fields stretched as far as he could see around the building, but large trees shaded the yard. It seemed a long way to walk from the road to the broad steps that led to the front door of the home. The sun was sinking behind the roof, and Ethan's heart sank with it. But he mustn't let the others know. They depended on him. So once again, he straightened his shoulders and tried to look in charge. Take Simon's hand, Alice, he told his sister, and I'll hold Will. To the station master, he added, thank you, sir. We'll be fine now. And that is the end of chapter 2.